There's a sign on a cruise ship cabin door. The kind you've probably walked past 100 times without thinking twice. It just means, do not disturb. On the night of November 6th, 2025, someone hung that exact sign on cabin 8343 aboard the Carnival Horizon, and behind it, Anna Kepner was already gone. What was already true behind that door before anyone else knew to look? For the next 7 months, the boy accused of putting her there walked free, not in hiding, not on the run, living with his uncle, wearing a GPS monitor, going to bed every night under the same roof as people who had no idea what a federal judge would eventually write down on paper that this 16-year-old showed, in the judge's own words, a level of psychopathy. How does someone live like that for 7 months? And here's the part that almost nobody is talking about. Anna had this habit. She'd send random "I love you" texts to the people in her life, for no reason at all, just because she felt like it. She didn't stop when her family blended with a new stepbrother 11 months before she died. So what happens when a girl who gives love away for free ends up trapped, feet away, from somebody who wanted to own it instead? That question, the sign on the door, the 7 months of freedom. None of it is a separate thread. It's all the same story. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why a federal judge looked at every page of this case and decided that no curfew, no monitor, nothing could be trusted to contain him. Picture this. The Carnival Horizon is already turned back toward Miami, cutting through nothing but black ocean for hundreds of miles in every direction. Inside, the Kepner Hudson family is finishing dinner together. Anna says she isn't feeling well. She gets up, says she's heading back to rest, and walks toward cabin 8343. Nobody at that table knows it yet. That's the last time most of her family will ever see her alive. At 7:35 p.m., the ship's cameras catch Timothy Hudson walking into that same cabin. 3 minutes later, Anna walks in behind him. The cameras never see her walk back out. Here's where the timeline gets strange. For hours, agents tracked Hudson opening and closing that door. In, out, in, out. But there's exactly one moment out of all of them where he stops first and checks both directions down the hallway. Just once. It's the single moment investigators flagged above everything else, just across that narrow hallway, close enough that a raised voice might have carried, "Her father was already asleep." At 10:53 p.m., Hudson hangs a privacy sign on the door. Just after midnight, Anna's 13-year-old half-brother tries to get back in for the night. Hudson blocks the door with his arm. "Wait," he says. "Don't come inside." He tells the boy he's changing. Eventually, he lets him in. And that 13-year-old falls asleep that night a few feet from his sister, not knowing she was already gone. The next morning, a room attendant opens that door and finds her. By then, Hudson is already moving. Cameras catch him leaving the cabin at 9:26, returning at 9:48, leaving again at 9:50, this time with something in his hand. 2 minutes later, he's at a trash bin on a completely different deck. Anna's phone went missing that same morning. Investigators pulled the GPS data off it. The phone had traveled the exact same path through that ship that Hudson did, straight to that same bin. A crew member found it there, smashed. Former Florida State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg, now a legal analyst, has said it plainly. Someone who walks a phone across a ship, damages it, and throws it away usually isn't doing that for no reason. Anna Kepner's phone took the exact same path through that ship that Timothy Hudson did. Investigators had this evidence within days of her death. So why did Timothy Hudson go home with his uncle instead of to a jail cell? But the phone isn't even the strangest part of what happens next. For months, almost none of this, the evidence, the timeline, even his name, was allowed to be public at all. The reason has everything to do with one number: his age. Here's what that number means. When Timothy Hudson was first arrested in February of 2026, he was processed as a juvenile. In the federal system that changes everything about what the public gets to see. His name, his charges, the evidence, all of it sealed. Because of his age, a magistrate judge released him into his uncle's custody in Hernando County, Florida. He wore a GPS monitor. He went about his life. Here's what's strange about that first hearing. The magistrate didn't pretend Hudson was low risk. He said on the record that if Hudson were even a few years older facing these same charges, detention wouldn't even be a question. He said that and still sent him home. So how does someone go from a sealed juvenile case to a courtroom that will eventually call him a danger to others? Let's walk through what built up to that. Family friend Stephen Weston, father of Anna's ex-boyfriend, has said Hudson's fixation on Anna was never exactly hidden. He called it an obsession. Hudson, in his words, always wanted to date her. Anna herself was reportedly afraid of him. She told people Timothy carried a large knife. She wasn't quiet about the fact that he scared her. Here's the part that's harder to explain away. Months before this cruise, Anna's ex-boyfriend Joshua says he watched Timothy climb on top of Anna during a FaceTime call while she was asleep. He told her parents what he saw. He raised the alarm. According to Weston, they didn't want to believe it. 11 months later, that same family boarded a 6-day cruise. Somebody assigned Timothy to share a cabin with Anna anyway. I genuinely don't know whether that cabin assignment was a deliberate decision or just how the rooms happened to be booked. I think that's worth sitting with instead of assuming. Here's something else worth sitting with. That detail about Anna sending random I love you texts, the one I mentioned earlier. It shouldn't matter to an investigation, but it does. Anna Kepner was the kind of person who handed out love for free to anyone who'd earned it. Somewhere inside this newly blended family, that same unguarded warmth may have become the very thing Timothy Hudson decided he was entitled to own. 11 months earlier, he had stood beside her at the same altar where their parents promised to make one family out of two. The phone evidence we just walked through is part of what convinced a grand jury to indict Hudson as an adult in April of 2026. But that raises its own question. If investigators already had all of this within days, why wasn't he behind bars back in February? If you'd heard what Joshua told Anna's parents months before that cruise, would you have let your daughter board that ship? I'm genuinely curious where you land on that. So when you put it all together, the obsession a family friend says he never hid, the fear Anna herself reportedly carried, the warning her own ex-boyfriend gave her parents months before they ever set foot on that ship, the picture becomes hard to misread. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't random. This was a fixation that had been building for almost a year, inside a family that didn't want to see it, until it ended in cabin 8343. That's how Anna Kepner died. At least, that's the story the evidence seemed to tell, right up until investigators ran one more test. Because as airtight as that story sounds, there's a piece of forensic evidence that doesn't fit it cleanly. A second DNA profile on Anna's body. And it has nothing to do with Timothy Hudson at all. Before you can understand what that means, you need to understand who Anna Kepner really was. Anna Kepner wasn't just a name on a court document. She was 18 years old, a few months from graduating, and she already had her life mapped out. She'd taken her military entrance exam. She wanted the Navy, then a career as a K-9 police officer. She knew exactly who she wanted to become. None of that is in the evidence file. All of it is gone. By every public account, Timothy Hudson was a 16-year-old with no prior criminal record. He'd been raised through a contested custody battle where his own parents accused each other of abuse, and the one quality people who knew him kept coming back to wasn't anger. It was obsession. Now let's get into what the forensic evidence actually says. When investigators examined Anna's body, they collected 2 vaginal swabs. Both carried male DNA. The lab results came back. The numbers were almost impossible to argue with. Hudson was 126 sextillion times more likely to be the source of DNA on one swab. On the second, 1.2 septillion times more likely. Then came the cause of death. A chokehold, prosecutors believe, held for 3 to 5 minutes. Mechanical asphyxiation. That's the official term. In plain terms, someone held on until there was nothing left. That hallway check we flagged earlier, the one at 10:13 p.m., it lines up almost exactly with the window pathologists believe places Anna's death. He wasn't checking out of habit. He was checking because of what had just happened inside. Anna's own family still called her Anna Banana, a nickname for a girl who, by every account, never stopped being happy. So where does that second DNA profile fit into all of this? Former Judge Tarlika Nunes Navarro, now a legal analyst, has said publicly that a second unmatched DNA profile gives Hudson's defense team a real opening to argue reasonable doubt. Here's the problem with that opening. Surveillance footage shows exactly 3 people entering cabin 8343 that night. Anna, her 13-year-old half-brother, already excluded, and Timothy Hudson. There's no footage of anyone else, not once. This is the moment cases like this one actually get broken. Not by a confession, but by a piece of evidence nobody can argue around. If you want to keep following every lead in this case all the way to that September trial, hit subscribe, because Case Break Network isn't going anywhere until this one's finished. Every piece of forensic evidence in this case points in exactly one direction. The only thing left to happen is for 12 people in a jury box to say it out loud. That jury is still months away. But long before any verdict comes down, there's a parking lot at Temple Christian School that already tells you everything about what was lost. Anna's car sat there for weeks after she died, decorated by classmates, parked in the exact spot she should have been pulling into every morning to finish her senior year. Somewhere in that parking lot, there's still a spot that used to be hers. That's the thing a federal judge couldn't ignore either. When Judge Edwin Torres signed the order that put Timothy Hudson back behind bars this month, he wrote that the conduct alleged here showed, in his own words, a level of psychopathy and lack of remorse, and that no curfew, no monitor, no custodial placement could be trusted to contain that. 7 months of freedom ended with that one sentence. If the full truth turns out to be more complicated than what the evidence suggests right now, a 16-year-old still deserves the chance to prove that in front of a jury, not in the comments section of a video. The same warmth Anna Kepner gave away for free, the "I love you" texts sent for no reason, the openness she never thought to guard, may be the very thing Timothy Hudson came to obsess over. That obsession, described by people who knew them both, is now part of the case prosecutors carry into a Miami courtroom this September. Anna Kepner's kindness was never the danger. What someone did with it was. It's spring of 2026, and the gymnasium at Temple Christian School is full. Anna walks across that stage in her cap and gown, the one she'd been planning toward since she took her Navy entrance exam. Her mother is already crying before her name is even called. Genevieve is filming the whole thing on her phone, just like always. None of that happened. If this stayed with you the way it's sitting with us right now, share it. Anna Kepner deserves more eyes on that Miami courtroom this September. Case Break Network is going to follow every lead on the Carnival Horizon case until this one's finished. Subscribe if you want to be here for that. Somewhere out there are people who got one of Anna Kepner's random I love you texts and never texted back. After everything you just learned about how she lived, and how Timothy Hudson is accused of taking that from her, maybe today's the day to finally answer one of yours. If you were on that jury in September, what's the one piece of evidence you wouldn't be able to get past? Tell me below. I read every one of these.